I believe we have work to do for the entire 2019 if we look at the recording and if we look at the good points, bad points, things which we need to fix, things which the project's ambassadors require or ask for. But nevertheless, I believe the next panel is a little bit more exciting and a little bit more like towards the future. And I would like to ask you, how many of you have heard about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Iota? Okay, not that many, but I'm very sure that you will learn more in the next session about all this. But before we start, we have a very important message from one of the members of the European Parliament, more specifically Ms. Marieke Schaake, which would like to transmit to all of you today something. So, video please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Marieke Schaake and I'm a member of the European Parliament with the Dutch Democratic Party D66. And here in the European Parliament, we are with the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. I serve on the committees for foreign affairs, international trade, as well as human rights, and I co-founded what is called the Digital Agenda Intergroup here in the European Parliament. And I'm very sorry I can't join you in person today, but I'm glad I could share some brief thoughts with you through this video. Now, many of you will be discussing exciting new use cases of commercial distributed ledger technology applications during the session that you are going to start. And I think it is good to focus on other applications of the use of these technologies, namely the application for the public and the social good. So my main message today is that I think Europe should take a leading role in funding and developing distributed ledger technologies for non-commercial applications, so that they can have clear benefits for our people and our societies. And in order for that to materialize, we will need more research to analyze, for example, how distributed ledgers can improve governance through increasing transparency, or how the technology can be used to prevent corruption, or to send home money through remittances, in another example. In the European Parliament, we've also looked at how we can increase the transparency of supply chains in order to combat, for example, the trade in conflict minerals that come from all over the world. And last year, I secured 1 million euros in funding out of the EU budget to encourage research into such social good applications, because I believe that European startups and other companies that are working on distributed ledger technologies for the public and social good deserve a push in the right direction. I hope you can come up with great ideas and new initiatives and that you'll keep me informed. I wish you a great and insightful discussion today. Thank you.
Such an interesting dialogue and such an interesting messages from Ms. Schaake. I like very much the concrete use cases which she provided, but nevertheless, we have an amazing panel to discuss further, to dig deeper, to find the challenges and opportunities of blockchain innovations here in Europe. And for this, I would like to invite on the stage our Deputy Head of Unit, Helen KÖPMAN, for the Unit Digital Innovation and Blockchain, Kristjan from Wepower Network, Julie MAUPIN from Iota, and Nina SIEDLER from DWF on the stage. Please.
Okay, good, super. I see a bit more people have found the room this morning. We had a very long line at security, so I'm glad you all came passed by there. So this is a complete change of subject, right? I mean, we had heard from the startup ecosystem builders out there the large part of this morning. Now we're going to focus on blockchain, and particularly blockchain innovations with my my very distinguished panel of speakers here, distinguished in many ways, and that you will hear about. I would just give a little bit of introduction and backdrop on what the European Commission is doing here and why we're interested in this topic. And I can assure you it's not about Bitcoin. It's about the underlying blockchain technology as such. Of course, we're not totally unaware of what's happening out there, and we are setting out a strategy for the European Commission together with industry and together with our member states. The first thing we have done is that we have set up a blockchain observatory forum to actually identify what's going on out there and trying to help everyone to get an understanding on where the state of the art of the blockchain innovation is. This forum has published a map. It's available on the EU Blockchain Observatory Forum website, where you can see something like 600, over 600 now, projects, initiatives, product services that are available around Europe and beyond. And it's very impressive. It shows that Europe has a big strength in this area. We have innovators, we have big industry, we have member state public services, all engaged here. So let's build on that. That's one of the things that we want to do with the Observatory Forum. The other thing we have done is that we have launched a partnership with the member states. This happened in April this year, and we have already been very busy from April working with the member states to identify use cases, specific use cases that would be interesting to deploy cross-border around Europe, and this work is now going forward. But this panel is not about the European Commission at all. This is about actually the people doing it for real out there. And I would just like to start by giving everyone a chance to give a little bit of their background, why they're working in this space. And I would like to start with Julie, if you can, from Iota, give your perspective to this.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much, Helen, for the invitation. So my name is Julie MAUPIN, and I work with the Iota Foundation. Iota is a distributed ledger technology, not a blockchain. It functions similarly to blockchain, but is based on different technology using directed acyclic graphs, if there are any mathematicians or engineers in the room. And that's because Iota is a distributed ledger technology that focuses on creating distributed ledgers with all of these nice properties of blockchain immutability, tamper-proofness, transparency, etc., but specifically for the Internet of Things environment, which means you need to be able to run such a ledger on very small, low-power, low-bandwidth devices, so-called edge devices, and integrate that with various different types of data flows, whether they be cloud-based or distributed types of data storage setups. So really trying to bring together Internet of Things, blockchain in quotes, and artificial intelligence so that we can do new things with all of this data that's being transmitted over the networks in ways that will help improve everyone's lives. And I'm very, very happy that, that the MEP started by making this call for using this kind of technology also both in commercial application but also for social good, for government applications, for solving sustainable development problems, because that happens to be what I do at the Iota Foundation. I'm the Director of Social Impact and Public Regulatory Affairs. So I have the privilege of working with governments and intergovernmental organizations to figure out how to use this technology. How can we bring together new types of sensor devices that give us real live information about what's happening on the ground, for example, in the rainforest, with technology that allows us to collect that data and transmit it in a secure and tamper-proof way, connect it up to global systems for incentivizing low-carbon emissions, things like that, and then try and bring together the monitoring, the reporting, the incentivization, and the payments all in one system. So that's an example of a project that we're working on at the Iota Foundation. We're also involved in creating distributed digital identities for humanitarian contexts to be able to register very rapidly people who come in a refugee or a crisis situation, like an Ebola outbreak or something, and need to be very quickly enrolled and identified so that you can distribute humanitarian aid to them. These kinds of things. And it's very important. And the other hat that I wear is regulatory affairs, and I get to work with people like my distinguished colleagues sitting here, also Nina and I sit together on the EU Blockchain Observatory Experts Groups. And this gives us a chance to talk about what needs to change in legislation, in regulation, in inter-European coordination, in order to make it easier for these projects to see the light of day. And I could talk all day about how difficult it was for Iota to sort of go through this learning curve, and the many learning curves we're still going through. But we've been established as a non-profit foundation for just over a year now, based in Germany. And we were the first non-profit foundation based in an EU member state to be financed with a cryptocurrency, which was not an easy task also to get through from a regulatory perspective. Yeah, so, but we're very happy that we are working in the EU and in Germany, because it also gives us a lot of credibility to be able to work with partners all over the world who don't need to fear that we're some sort of fly-by-night operation trying to evade regulatory oversight, but that we genuinely want to work together with the public sector to do good things in the world.
That's a very, very good intro. Thank you so much. Many, many things there that I think we should pick up on later in the discussion. But I will hand over to Nina SIEDLER to tell us about your point of view of where you're coming from, why you're in this space.
Yeah, my name is Nina SIEDLER. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm originally a capital markets lawyer, still working with DWF, a global law firm. But in the Berlin office, where I'm located, we are purely concentrating on blockchain and DLT-related matters for now over 2 years. And I think we had been involved in many of the projects which started out of Germany. And 2017, I had been founding member of the Bundesblock, the German Blockchain Association, where I also had the finance working group. We issued a paper about token regulation earlier this year, which we are now broadening to the EU. So we gathered European colleagues in a think tank we just formed last week called Think Block Tank with seat in Luxembourg to issue the European token regulation paper by the end of the year. And yes, we are also being part of the working group policy and framework conditions of the Blockchain Observatory and Forum, and submitted some proposals for a workshop actually taking place next week in Paris about regulatory priorities, for which we suggested a couple of things to take into account. That's maybe a broad overview. And alongside with the financial regulatory topics, my second point of concentration is on the off-chain governance systems of blockchains. So I'm very much trying to push the development of public digital infrastructure built up not only by governmental bodies, but also by privately organized organizations. And there you always come across the question how to organize the off-chain governance structure. And I'm on the board of the Interplanetary Database Foundation, another charitable organization with seat in Berlin, which aims to build a blockchain, a publicly accessible blockchain upon the big chain DB technology. And how do we try to tackle the governance issue there? It's a permission blockchain, which means that the nodes and validators can only be members of the foundation. And that's how we try to capture them and to build a legal framework surrounding that blockchain that is built up.
Thank you very much, Nina. Very interesting as well. We will come back to some of the issues you mentioned there in our questions. I would like to hand over to Kristjan KUHI, and who is a real entrepreneur in this space, and let us know what kind of journey you went through in the company you work for.
Yes, thank you for inviting here. Yes, I'm the happy user of public blockchain technology. I'm from a company called Wepower. We build next generation digital utility, which means that we are consolidating quite a lot of different topics, and which is which are interesting from energy and energy distribution perspective, and trying to optimize this kind of technology landscape. This is technology story. From the problem point of view, we are starting from energy procurement and trading perspective, which enables to increase actually capital flows into renewable energy, which we, know is important topic from if you have heard or read about the latest UN climate change report, then sevenfold increase in capital or investment flows is actually needed to still live on the planet after couple of years or couple of hundred of years. So yeah, from Wepower perspective, we have successfully completed the ICO in February. Back then, it was the largest ICO in energy space. We basically got financing for, it was equal to $40 million worth of cryptocurrency, which if you look at the volatility of the crypto market, you can do the counting, what is the net worth right now. There are so many interesting things that come with the crypto, that come with the blockchain as a technology. I'm not sure even which side we should go today and discuss about.
Okay, this is very interesting. We will build on these introductions, and I would like to, I think, hook on to something that you said, Kristjan, about this your successful initial coin offering and the cryptocurrencies, which is an inherent mechanism of the blockchain technology, and can make the companies actually fund their activities. So, Nina, I know that you've been working with companies, actually helping them shape their business plans around blockchain technology, building on that, and using cryptocurrencies to launch their activity. Well, can you tell us a little about this activity and your experience from that? Maybe successes or failures around that.
Yeah, happy to share. So typically, when clients come to us to discuss the idea of undertaking an ICO, they have a more or less clear idea about the technology product that they want to offer, but typically not really much insight of what that means legally or even tax-wise. So the first thing that we try to explain is what that product or how that product will fit into the regulatory and tax landscape. And most of the projects like to put any nice-to-haves into their offerings, so they have some utility attached to the token they want to issue, and then they attach a little bit of voting right for some question to it, and maybe even some sharing of fee income arriving from that, and then we end up saying, well, this kind of hybrid token doesn't really fit into any box, and from a regulatory perspective, you will need to accept that you will fall under any of these categories. So you have to satisfy any requirements from prospectus to maybe some license and whatever else there is out for the specific case. In the energy sector, there might be more regulatory things to observe, for example, or within the health industry. And then tax jumps in and says, well, we don't really know what your token is, so if you put a utility to it, you might have to take into account VAT, and then if it is a currency like most of the platform models issue, you might end up with a huge profit tax problem if you collect large funds all at once and cannot spend it during the first year of the ICO. So yeah, we really try to sort it. And also to highlight that whatever we tell them, you know, being German lawyers, only applies to German law, and that the question of the location, which is also typically one of the first questions they raise, where should we actually locate that project? That for the location, it's basically tax, which is most important to observe, but for the regulatory perspective, it's wherever they want to market and sell their product. So the location of the venture is actually not that important if you want to get answers to the regulatory framework applying to your offering. And then the typical, you know, blacklist, whitelist discussion kicks in. So who's aware, you know, who knows what that means or refers to, black and white list? Nobody? So I better explain. Typically in the crypto space, everyone wants to launch globally at once. That is simply not really possible, right? Any company who wants to do a more or less global offering understands that they need to go step by step because they have to check any jurisdiction singly what is required to actually offer that product there. So what was typically seen in the crypto space is that they came up with blacklists of countries where they would not offer their token, typically including the US, because everybody is afraid of the SEC, and maybe China after the ban of the ICOs, but then, you know, the rest of the world was just accepted. And we really tried to push the scene to go rather for a whitelisting, right, where they actually whitelist the countries where they are sure that they satisfy the local requirements. Yeah, but the whole space needs to grow up, and I think that was what we could see during 2018 happening.
Definitely. I mean, we have seen an incredible surge in initial coin offerings as an alternative mechanism to finance your company. I think it's coming almost like as a competitor, a real competitor to VC, and that startups will look at this space quite early in their activities. But I suppose we hear that it's somewhat unregulated space, and there are different regulations, different jurisdictions that the companies have to consider and get help from people to do. So this is probably one of the topics that I think that we have been discussing in the blockchain consortium forum, which actually has two working groups. One is looking at the regulatory framework and the fitness of the regulatory framework in Europe in this space, and the other one is on use cases. But maybe, Julie, you could tell us a little bit about that work. I mean, what kind of discussions are going on there? What kind of areas do you see materialize as areas that we should have a look at, perhaps on a pan-European level or European level?
Yeah, so I sit on the working group on use cases, and one point that I'd like to make is that lawyers and entrepreneurs think very, very differently. They see the world in an entirely different way, and this is a good thing. And you know, if you step back and take the more global view and think about all of this technology and how it's developed, we wouldn't have Bitcoin, we wouldn't have Ethereum, we wouldn't have Iota, we wouldn't have all of the innovation that's come out of these projects had people not just gotten together and done stuff. Without, they had no clue about the regulatory environment. They didn't ask, they just built it. And it's very similar, actually, to a lot of the most significant innovation that we saw in the 90s with building what became our current internet. And you know, you can ask permission or you can ask forgiveness as an entrepreneur. And sometimes asking permission leads to no's or to such significant delays that, that your idea doesn't come to market or it doesn't come to fruition or somebody else beats you to it. So this is a very different way of thinking. And what we really need is we need an agile regulatory system. And regulators are historically not good at that. And there are good reasons for that as well, because they have to be fair and they have to be systematic and they have to make sure that they're not exceeding their competencies and all of these, you know, legal reasons. But we have to find better ways of bringing together startup communities and startup ideas earlier on in the process, so that things that are going from this sort of seed idea stage into wanting to deploy and test in the real world have safe ways of doing that without worrying about being prosecuted by the SEC or BaFin or whoever. And it's everything, as Nina said. It's health data policy, it's tax, it's not just financial law. It's really everything. So it's quite overwhelming, and usually startups don't know even who they should be speaking with. So it's something that was said on the previous panel as a recommendation I really want to strongly second, which is that the European Commission, the European Parliament, all of the main regulatory agencies in the member states should be going out and visiting people more. Recently, the European Central Bank has been doing a roadshow, for example, around Europe, where they're visiting lots of different technology capitals, cities in different countries where they know a lot of innovation is taking place. And they just made a bunch of appointments with people. They came and visited Iota. They visited maybe 20 other startups in Berlin and Paris, Barcelona, all over the EU. Just to find out what is going on, actually. How should we view it? How should this inform how we think about money and about the management of the European monetary system in the future? And to have that kind of a conversation in a friendly sort of manner around a table, let's learn from each other, let's understand this, is a very different experience. And a great way for startups to get engaged, as opposed to fearing a subpoena sitting on your doorstep when you wake up in the morning. So really, I think a lot of it is about the messaging, the communication of culture of innovation, and being welcoming and open to that by communicating, look, we understand that you think differently from us. We're lawyers, we make the law and we enforce it as the Commission. But we understand you think differently, and we need you here doing this innovation that's breaking things and that's crossing boundaries and that's not respecting national jurisdictions and particular boxes that regulators fit into.
You want to say something about this one? I saw you were
maybe
jumping in. Yeah.
That's right. And that's maybe where the European Commission or Europe as a whole could actually help, because Europe is too splintered with regards to that technology. There is a couple of regulations which apply on a European basis, but each of that areas has local specifications attached to it, so you can actually not only rely looking into the European regulations, but you still need to go to each single country to check what they added to that. And that is really hindering, creating one single European market, and that's maybe something to work on.
Very good. I think we try to do this in the forum. And first of all, identify the areas that are sort of pain places for everyone that we could look at together. Maybe mentioned the initial coin offerings. Another area that I'm interested in, I think it's in your line of work, Kristjan, is like the smart contracts. I think this is something that, well, it's one of the features of the technology that I think you're working with the energy in the energy area. Is this also something that you think we should have a look at, pan-European wise?
Oh yes. First of all, Julie, can you put it on the paper what you just said, and then maybe I can sign somewhere. So it all was to the point. But regarding smart contracts. Yes, I mean, still, if you want to today, for example, digitalize power purchase agreements, which we do in Australia right now, then there is no way that you only have like a digital record today of those contracts. You always need to duplicate everything on the paper. So you just cannot have digitalized contracts right now, which are legally binding, let's say. So yes, that's definitely a topic.
I mean, so smart contracts have been around as a concept for a long time, and it's not because of blockchain that has been invented. It's just a way with the technology to perhaps more enforce or more use the concept of smart contract that could be interesting. So yes, I think that this is one of the areas that we also discussed in the Observatory for Regulatory Group that could be looked into.
Yeah, maybe good example here is this EIDAS project that you have successfully completed or at least completed some stage of that project in European Commission right now. The underlying technology of all those digital signatures is actually, which we nowadays call blockchain, right? Back then, in early 2000s, maybe it was called a little bit different way. But basically, we are using blockchain already. So why not do the same with smart contracts?
Excellent. Another thing that I heard in the beginning, I think, of Julie, your speech is that you take this also from a perspective of the whole holistic technology concept that we have around. So it's in our toolbox, and I'm thinking about Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So, of course, blockchain is not to be seen in isolation, is it? It's definitely a set of a toolbox. And what's your experience of actually putting these components together? Is it a perfect match?
I think yes, it will be a perfect match, but is a huge learning curve with each project that you specifically attempt to put in, bring to life. Each time we think about a project that we think our technology could serve a useful function in solving a piece of the puzzle, we very much think of it as a piece of the puzzle. We are providing a general protocol, an open, public, permissionless ledger that can be used for secure encrypted communication, that can be used for micropayments, that can be used for proving provenance or data non-interoperability. Very useful functions, but that's not the end game. I mean, you don't solve climate change with a ledger, right? You don't solve anything. You can't do remittances just with a ledger. You have lots of other pieces of the puzzle that you have to solve. So what we try and look at is what role does our technology play, and how do we work with others who can solve a problem together? Who are we missing from our coalition that provides expertise in different areas? So to give an example, if you look at the project that we're working on right now with creating rapid enrollment digital identity system for humanitarian situations, you are operating there in an environment where you have severe connectivity constraints. So we think that we bring a useful innovation to this environment because we are focused on Internet of Things devices, low bandwidth, low power. Also, intermittent connectivity and partition tolerance is a feature of our ledger, so we can do that. But you still have to have some kind of connectivity somehow, which means you need people in the field who know how to and have the devices and the technology to create LoRaWAN, local LoRaWAN connections, or you have to figure out what can we do with satellite connectivity, VSAT, in refugee camps or things like this. So this is why we're building up partnerships and working together with large corporate partners like Motorola or pan-European initiatives like the European Space Agency to figure out how do we solve connectivity, how do we work together with people who make devices, who can measure things in the field, water management, sensors having to do with air quality for climate change use cases. It's really a full end-to-end tech stack. And then of course you need the firms who are really good at user design, app design, and you have to think about how does a person who may be illiterate, definitely doesn't speak the language of the designer of the technology, how does that person interact with some kind of an app in the field? Or how do they react when they're asked to put their finger to a sensor to register a fingerprint or to have their face scanned or something like this? So there are many, many different players that you have to bring together to build a successful project that has a positive social impact. And you really have to have a collaborative spirit and be humble about what your technology contributes and where it comes to an end.
I think we've really seen with this example that blockchain is really has gone out of its cradle of Bitcoin and all this hype into a much broader application in all kinds of societal areas, and we have calls for using blockchain even more for societal goods. We have even a prize that we announced this morning that is open right now, blockchain for social good, in a competition of 5 million divided into projects that could respond to that challenge. So interesting. But so solving problems and getting out there, and since we have people here in the room that are probably interested in this area, I would like to give an opportunity to the audience sitting here that have heard these interesting interventions and insights into blockchain and how to work with that technology. Maybe you would like to ask some questions to the panel on particularly your problems and what problems you are in the process of solving to the experts.
Following Iota's work very well, and can Iota be the next platform that all the global world can use to build more apps on decentralized technologies? For example, you're doing R&D, but do you have a platform that you can use, that you can give to developers? And yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the idea behind Iota as a public permissionless ledger, open source, is to really enable open source innovation. So the Iota Foundation can only do so much, and the real value of the technology is in how other people build on it and use it and improve it. That's the whole idea behind open source innovation in general. Will Iota be the one platform that the whole world uses? I hope so. I'd love to think so, but I think we also have to be realistic about the technology challenges themselves within the distributed ledger space. The reality is, when you build a technology for a particular environment, you optimize it to do certain things. And different technology designs do different things well. You know, Bitcoin is a money, but you can't really do smart contracts with it. You can't really do Internet of Things devices with it. Ethereum was invented really to focus on this idea of smart contracts. Iota for you know, sensors, Internet of Things devices, really this kind of future industrial 4.0 and beyond world, enabled by artificial intelligence and adaptive neural networks and things like this. But when you design a technology for a particular thing, then you make decisions that then have consequences about how well it can do other things. So in Iota, for example, smart contracts is something that has taken a lot of time for us to figure out how to do. We have some very talented people working on figuring out what smart contracts look like in Iota, developing something called Cubic. But when you divide up data packets among tiny little devices with very small processing power, you can't run a smart contract in the way that we see it on Ethereum, because they're big and they're chunky, and you need high processing power to do that. So the technology challenges that you run into when trying to create a universal platform for everything are immense. And I think that's why we see so many different projects out there innovating. People are trying to solve this piece or that piece. Many of them will fall by the wayside, and I think we'll see a massive consolidation in the next few years towards the platforms that are doing really useful things well, as well as improvements in interoperability between the major platforms that do something really useful well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Julie. Any other questions from the audience? Now you have the opportunity. I mean, talk directly to the expert about your projects. We have a gentleman over there.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Fabian from the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. So I just put it black and white to get to the point. Say I'm not convinced that blockchain is the big issue as it is put out at the moment. So my question would be, where's the actual benefit of transferring ledger systems we have now, especially in Central Europe? When it comes to payment, we have a functioning banking system. So where's the benefit of changing all that to a blockchain? So maybe you can give me some concrete some examples so I can learn something.
I think there are several use cases where the technology, as you said, as one piece in the puzzle makes a lot of sense. For example, if you look at the data currently collected within certain companies or certain governmental bodies, which are needed by others to actually enhance their technology, especially in the AI field, where you need a lot of massive data to actually grow the technology further. In those cases, it makes sense to break up the silos of data and to compile them in some way that they are not any longer owned by any specific company or group of companies, but that they are administered together in a way that everyone has the same reach to them. And exactly such things can be organized by using the blockchain technology. And there are further examples where a blockchain can add value. Like, for example, if you think of Germany, a ledger compiling all the certificates somebody, or not the ledger compiling, but in the digital identity space, if you would permit people to actually show in a digital way what certificates they got from the school to university to anything else they have done, and other peoples could validate that those certificates are actually true. That's another use case. For example, I think the Zurich or some university in Switzerland is experimenting with, and they already have a pilot out there for their own certificates. I think, yeah. So I think that there are actually useful cases, but I completely agree, blockchain is not the solution for everything.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to wrap up this panel now. I just would like to ask a very last question to all of the panelists. So your conclusion from your point of view, what should we do more on as public services on European level, besides what the actions we have undergoing right now? What more would you like? As if you could have a wish for Christmas, what would you want us to do?
Yeah. Just to summarize and just to kind of again go back what you said about having some sort of discussion partner, just to make sure that you are not going jail in let's say in close moment of time, or the agile way to kind of approach the regulation would be definitely good wish from Santa Claus.
Yeah, central point of contact is also one request we raised. In addition to that, I would really like to invite the European bodies to strive hard to actually create one single European market, as it is currently simply not existing in reality. I think that would be the big wish.
I think for me it would be the creation of an agile innovation zone, where startups can come with a single point of contact and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're building. Can you help us figure out how we can deploy this, test it in a live environment, respond iteratively to your concerns as they arise, rather than having to go through the checklist of this agency and that agency and this one and that one and all the member states and at the pan-European level and the SEC and everybody else, by which time your idea is dead in the water, or you've run out of funds long ago to accomplish that, no matter how many EU grants you apply for. It really having a space where you can, in an agile way, say, look, this is what we're building. Tell us what your concerns are about it, and we'll address them. But we don't have the capacity as startups to go around and do a roadshow at every jurisdiction who happens to be touched in some way, shape, or form by the technology that we've built, or some consumer in a country we never even thought about is using it because it's open source, that it's public permissionless technology, right? And they can spin up a node and use it if they want. We can't stop them from doing that. So there needs to be a safe space for having those conversations. whether it's called an agile innovation lab or something that has that concept of iterative responsiveness to concerns raised by lawmakers and regulators without shutting down the innovation.
Okay, great. So more harmonized regulation, perhaps regulatory sandboxes, and an innovation space as a single market for Christmas then. And we will go out and talk to you more about this and help our innovators and startups to do this, hopefully. Thank you so much. I'd like you to join me to thank the panel for their valuable insights and also audience for participating. Thank you very much.